Hello students and welcome to video 2 in chapter 2.3 Leadership and Management. And in the first video we covered the difference between management and leadership and we went through those management theories. In this video we're going to look at different leadership styles. We're going to start off with autocratic, which you may have heard before. Autocratic is when leaders take decisions on their own without input from others and then announce the decision to employees. So basically leaders are making all the decisions on their own. They're not asking employees, and then they just tell the employees what the decisions are. And this is also can kind of be related to centralized decision making. So centralization is when decisions are made at the center or at the top of the organization overall. Now, generally autocratic, if you're an employee, this seems really bad, right? Because you have no say in what's going on. But it can be suitable under certain situations. So one of the benefits of autocratic leadership is that decisions are made very quickly. Because the leader's making all decisions without talking to employees, they can just make the decisions. So it enables quick decision making. And also, if the employees are unskilled or not wanting to make decisions, then it can actually be beneficial in that situation, because if employees have participation and they're unskilled, then maybe the decisions will actually be worse overall. But clearly there's going to be some impact on employees. And if employees are not contributing to any decision making and the leaders making all the decisions, then you can argue that employees are going to become dependent on the leaders, and they're never going to make decisions themselves because they're used to the leaders actually making decisions. So you can end up with employees kind of being robotic and not thinking and just following what everyone tells them to do. And in general, autocratic will lead to low morale and high staff turnover because employees don't feel like they're involved in what's going on in the business. Now, this is not always the case. And two really good examples of where autocratic can work very well is, say, the armed forces, where people need to follow orders, if you like, and therefore autocratic works very well there. And also in emergency services, where whenever decisions need to be made quickly, then autocratic can work very, very well. Okay, moving on to the second one is paternalistic. Now, paternalistic is similar to autocratic, but in this situation, leaders will listen to employees and make decisions in their best interest. But importantly, they still make the final decision. So in this situation, the leader still makes the decision. They're still making that final decision, but they will be thinking about the best interests of their employees along the way. So this diagram kind of summarizes this, where you've got a leader who's still obviously powerful and making those decisions, but they're looking after the staff, and they want their staff to feel important and want their staff to be happy. Now, where does paternalistic come from? Paternalistic comes from the Latin pater, which means father. So this is similar to there being like a father figure. So in this situation, you can see that this person's like a father figure in this situation. We use the word father because then they're caring about their staff. There's clearly a gender bias here because it's referring to a man, but this term was come up with many years ago. So that's ultimately where it comes from, if you like. So the impact is, compared to autocratic, we're going to get higher morale, and that's because staff are going to feel like they're being listened to, and so therefore staff are going to be more loyal, more motivated, but they still have no participation in decision making. So there's still going to be that problem alongside autocratic. So moving on to the next one, talking about employees not having decisions. Well, democratic is the reverse. Now here, employees participate in decision making. Decisions are made based on what the majority decides. So clearly this is related to politics, where we have a democracy. Democratic is effectively having a democracy within the organization. Now, how this works can depend on the situation. This could be done through voting. It could be done through a show of hands or through a ballot system, or just a simple Google form, if you like, or it could be done through informal discussions. So a manager might talk to various employees and then kind of work out for themselves what the majority think. So the impact is going to be, well, clearly there's going to be higher morale because staff feel empowered, and so they're going to feel like they're contributing towards the organization. So in theory, this should lead to lower staff turnover. And staff are also going to be more committed to decisions. So any decisions that are made, employees are more likely to follow and abide by those decisions because they feel like they've been involved in them. One big issue is slow decision making. So in contrast to autocratic, where leaders can just make decisions quickly, here we need to go through this process. And it could be quite lengthy because people need to talk, have meetings, etc., etc. Additionally, leaders and employees need certain skills because the leaders will have to be able to listen to everyone. So they'll need to have good listening skills. Employees will now be able, because they're making decisions, they'll have to have decision-making skills. And so you need a certain type of culture and skills in those situations. And startups are often run democratically. On to the next one, which is laissez-faire. So this is a situation where leaders trust and allow employees to make decisions on their own. And in this situation, decision-making is mostly done by employees and there's little actual input from managers. And this comes from the French, basically means let them do it or hands off. And it's kind of also called hands off management, where basically managers are trusting employees and employees are making those decisions. So this can be very suitable in some situations. If teams need freedom or need to be creative, then allowing teams the autonomy to actually go and do what they want is more likely to lead to these things. And it works best when employees are highly skilled and self-motivated. Clearly, if you have employees who are not motivated, if managers are not watching what they're doing, then there's going to be a tendency to slack off, to not do much work. And so it works well when employees are self-motivated and they're well skilled and therefore able to direct themselves. And this tends to work well in R&D, where you need creativity, in other certain industries. Not necessarily, but it can work well there. So the final one is situational, and this is kind of like a combination of all of the ones we've done so far. And this is when a leader adjusts their style to suit the situation or task. And so the good thing here is that the leader has flexibility. They can suit their leadership style to the situation. But it can be confusing for employees because if you're an employee and one day your manager is using an autocratic style, then maybe you get used to that. And then the next time they're using a laissez-faire, it can actually be confusing and it might be difficult to know how to operate under those situations. And also, can a leader actually change their leadership style? There's been research done, and it's questionable whether leaders can actually change their leadership style. So that's one of the downsides of situational. Okay, moving on to some questions that might come up with this. So one common question might be, well, what happens if a business or a leader changes their style? So it could be evaluate the impact of changing from democratic leadership to autocratic leadership. Obviously, this depends on the situation. There's so many factors. But in general, some of the pros and cons are, well, the pros of moving to autocratic is now quicker decision making. Remember, we said democratic's a lot slower. And so the leader can just make decisions. It's going to be much quicker decision making. And also things can be implemented quicker. We now have a clear hierarchy. If we have autocratic leadership style, then it's clear employees know who's in charge. And that can be beneficial because if we have a problem, we know where to go to. And also we're going to have consistent goals and direction. If all of the decisions are being made at the top, then everyone's going to follow those decisions and therefore it's going to be consistent. Cons of moving to autocratic, or like we said, lower staff morale. There's likely to be more conflict because employees are now less involved in the decision making, so they're going to be less happy in general with the decisions being made. Also, if employees are used to a democratic leadership style and you take away that ability for them to contribute to all decisions, that's going to be difficult for them. And so therefore there's more likely to be conflict and etc. And now we're going to have more dependency on the decision of one person or a team. And so because previously under democratic, lots of people are proposing ideas, and now we just have one person or one team making decisions. So you could argue that we become dependent on them, and you could argue that there's worse decision making because we're not listening to everyone. And somebody's going to have a good idea somewhere. Another example would be autocratic to laissez-faire. So benefits of moving to laissez-faire from autocratic is now employees are motivated, they're empowered. So hopefully staff motivation should go up as staff feel like they can make their own decisions. We should get higher levels of creativity because employees can now take the initiative, they can manage their own time and their own tasks, and therefore they're more likely to do what they want or do things which suit the things in order to meet their own objectives. And employees should become more skilled. And the reason for that is now employees are making decisions for themselves, they're managing their workload, they're choosing where to focus, and therefore it's developing those skills. Some cons may be some employees may become less productive, or you could say they become more lazy, or they do less work because they feel like managers are not watching them. And that's obviously a clear downside here. Management in general will know less about what's going on. Previously, managers were making decisions so they could kind of know what everyone was doing. But if everyone's doing what they think is best, then managers are going to find it more difficult to know what's going on. So they're going to have to find out. And also, we're going to get less standardized output. Again, if everyone's making decisions about what they should be doing, then everyone's going to be doing different things, if you like, and there's going to be less standardization overall. So that leads us on to the final slide. What is the best leadership style? Clearly, there's no correct answer here because it depends on so many factors. So, for example, it depends on the personality of the leader. So if a leader is naturally democratic, then that's probably a leadership style that's going to suit them best. And so that's going to have a key impact on what the best leadership style is. Skills and expertise of employees, like we said, if employees are less skilled, then maybe autocratic is slightly better. If employees are self-directed, motivated, and skilled, then laissez-faire could work well. The nature of the work is going to have an impact. The culture of the company, culture of the country is going to impact it, etc., etc., etc. And for me, in general, I prefer a laissez-faire style of management. I'm quite self-directed. I like to get on with my work. But my favorite teacher at school was very, very autocratic. So those are kind of that's a different situation. And the reason for it was this teacher was a very, very good teacher, but they just happened to be autocratic because of their personality. But I liked the class because you always knew what was going on. The teacher would come in and say, right, do this. And you go, okay. But they knew what they were doing. They were very skilled. And so what's the best leadership style just depends on so many different factors. Right, that is now all of that chapter done. I'll see you next time.